The Siege of Leningrad. This wasn't just another battle in a massive war. It was a calculated, deliberate attempt to literally wipe a city and all its people right off the map. So let's dive into what is truly one of the most brutal and lethal sieges in all of modern history. Okay, so picture this. It's 1941. Germany has just invaded the Soviet Union, and almost immediately, Leningrad is on the front lines. This image, it just perfectly captures that initial grim determination. You have an anti-aircraft gun firing defiantly into the sky with the famous dome of St. Isaac's Cathedral in the background. This is the very beginning of an unimaginable struggle for survival. And how long did that struggle last? 872 days. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's nearly 2.5 years. For that entire time, this city, a city of 3 million people, was completely trapped, cut off from the rest of the world. But you have to ask, why? Why this city? Specifically, what made Leningrad such a critical target that Hitler wanted it not just captured, but completely annihilated? Well, that's what we're going to get into right now. To really get this, you have to understand that Leningrad wasn't just some random city. Symbolically, it was huge. It was the old capital of Russia, the very cradle of the Bolshevik Revolution. For the Nazis, it was the ideological heart of their enemy. Then there's the military side. It was the main base for the entire Soviet Baltic fleet. And economically, it was a powerhouse, churning out over 1/10 of all Soviet industrial goods. So yeah, taking Leningrad wasn't just an option for Operation Barbarossa. It was absolutely critical. And this is where it gets truly chilling. You have to read the actual German plan to understand their intentions. This directive from late September 41 lays it all out. They weren't interested in a surrender. They weren't planning on feeding anyone. The plan was to surround the city and let every single person inside starve to death. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a premeditated, genocidal strategy. So how did they pull it off? I mean, how does an army manage to trap almost 3 million people inside their own city? Let's take a look at how that ring of steel was forged around Leningrad. The German advance was just terrifyingly fast. Army Group North basically tore through the Baltic states. You can see on the map their forces are just relentlessly pushing toward the city. The Soviet defenses, frankly, were just overwhelmed by the speed and the sheer ferocity of the Blitzkrieg. The trap slammed shut with incredible speed in the late summer of 41. On August 30th, bam, the Germans cut the very last railway line into the city. A day later, their Finnish allies to the north stopped their advance, essentially locking the northern gate. Then the final piece fell on September 8th, when German troops took a town called Schlüsselburg, right on the shore of Lake Ladoga. And that was it. The land encirclement was complete. So with that iron ring closed tight, the story stops being about military strategy and becomes about something much more raw: human survival. What was it actually like, day to day, for the people trapped inside? These two images, side by side, they tell such a devastating story. On the left, you see that initial wave of defiance. You have women, ordinary citizens, digging these massive anti-tank ditches to defend their home. But on the right, that's the reality, just a few months later. A woman dragging a skeletal man on a sled through the snow. That initial raw defiance crashed headfirst into a slow, agonizing reality. The main weapon the Germans used against Leningrad was simple: starvation. And during that first absolutely horrific winter of 1941, the daily bread ration for an ordinary person dropped to just 125 grams. To put that in perspective, that's about the weight of a deck of cards. And what's worse, the bread itself was often over half sawdust, cellulose, anything that could find add bulk. But there was one single sliver of hope. It was called the Road of Life, a desperate, makeshift supply line built across the frozen surface of Lake Ladoga. Trucks would race across the ice under constant German bombing and shelling to bring in a trickle of supplies and evacuate the weakest people. It was the city's only connection to the world, a lifeline made of ice. The hunger became so absolute, so profound, that it led to the ultimate human taboo. We know from Soviet secret police records of the time that there were arrests for both corpse eating and person eating. Now, this was done by a very small fraction of people, but the fact that it happened at all, it just speaks to a level of desperation that is almost impossible for us to even comprehend. And as if starvation wasn't enough, you have to remember the city was under a constant, relentless bombardment. German artillery and air raids were just a feature of daily life. This heartbreaking photo shows children in a hospital, all of them crippled by German shells. Every single day was a gamble. Would you die from a bomb, a shell, or from hunger? So the city endures for 2.5 years. But how was the siege finally broken? Let's shift now to the Red Army's long and bloody fight to punch a hole through those German lines and free the city. Now, this wasn't a war of fast movement. Forget blitzkrieg. This was brutal, grinding trench warfare. For years, Soviet soldiers fought and died in one bloody attack after another, trying to break the encirclement. These battles were some of the most savage of the entire war on the Eastern Front. The breakthrough finally came in 2 stages, a full year apart. The first real glimmer of hope was in January 1943 with something called Operation Iskra, which means spark. The Red Army finally managed to punch a narrow, 8-mile-wide land corridor through to the city. It helped, but the siege wasn't over. The city wasn't truly free until January 1944, when a massive final assault, the Leningrad-Novgorod offensive, finally shattered the German lines and pushed them back for good. And this is that moment of liberation. For years, this sign warned citizens that this side of the street is the most dangerous during the artillery barrage. And now, it's just a relic. You can see people gathered around it, reading it, trying to process that the terror is finally over. You can feel the relief, but you can also see the deep, deep scars left by those 872 days of trauma. The city was free, but that victory, it came at a price that is just staggering, almost beyond belief. Now we have to confront the real human cost of Leningrad's incredible defiance. Just look at these numbers. They're mind-numbing. Over 640,000 civilians died during the siege from starvation and bombing. Another 400,000 died trying to be evacuated. And on the military side, the Soviets lost over 1 million soldiers killed or captured. In total, the death toll is estimated to be as high as 1.5 million people, maybe even more. And that's why many historians have come to a stark conclusion. When you talk about sheer human suffering, the scale of death and deprivation, the battle for Leningrad really has no equal in all of modern warfare. It just stands alone as the most destructive siege a modern city has ever had to endure. And yet, somehow, through all of that, the city's spirit endured. This last image is so poignant. You see Soviet ski troops moving past the famous Hermitage Museum. It's this powerful symbol of survival, a military victory that also saved the cultural heart of a city that simply refused to die. So in the end, the Siege of Leningrad was an undeniable Soviet victory. It was a testament to a level of human resilience that's hard to fathom. It was also, without a doubt, the most lethal siege in all of history. Which leaves us with one final, haunting question. At what cost?